Hi, everyone. This is Amanda Smith, Community Practice Manager for Learning and Development at the Association for Talent Development. Thank you for joining us today. I have the wonderful pleasure of meeting and talking with Deadra Welcome. Deadra Welcome is with Concerning Learning, a consulting firm here in the DC area, and her specialty is mainly in blended learning, but she does a breadth of talent development practices and services, and so she's going to lend us her expertise on this with her 25 years of experience, with 21 being in L&D. We thought that, she would be the one who would be good on giving us some of those nuggets that we're always looking for on blended learning, as we know this is a sort of an area of instructional design where people are still trying to wrap their brains around. And Deadra Welcome is going to kind of demystify that for us with given her background and everything that she's been doing over the course of the 25 years. She's a regular contributor for the Association for Talent Development. And for those who will be at ICE this year, we are going to be debuting our new ID Resource Center, which you'll see Deadra on there kind of giving us some more nuggets around instructional design. So please, without further ado, I want to welcome Deadra Welcome. How are you? And that was kind of odd with welcome and welcome. I'm sure you get that a lot.
I do. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Well, Deadra, I want to, before we get into the whole blended learning, and I tried to, give a little bit of overview about your background, but you're just doing so much, and, you got this wonderful company that you're heading up and doing all these fabulous things in talent development. Would you mind just giving our users just a little bit of background about you and how you got started and how Concerning Learning came to be?
Sure, not a problem. I am what we call an accidental trainer, and so I got into learning and development as a result of a senior professional retiring and going on to other things. So I was a summer hire within the government, and I did some stay in school and co-op, which is now the Pathways program within the federal government. And she was retiring, and so there was a need for us to take over her role as a training coordinator. And so I decided that, that would be a good path. Let me learn about this training thing. What is this all about? And so as I was learning about it, I really began to really enjoy learning and development and what it does and how it helps others within the organization improve. And so I've been hooked ever since, and it's been a really rewarding career relating to learning and development. So that's really me, the accidental trainer who just stuck with it and has broadened into instructional design and training program management and development. And I'm just a passionate learner myself. That's really how I got started in the career.
Well, it's so funny you say that. I mean, getting into the career accidentally, as you said, is something that I hear time and time again, especially in L&D. Trainers today, kind of fall into these roles where they're asked to create training programs, and they're like, oh my gosh, which is, some of us freak out, and some of us try to, make a career out of it, especially if it's something that you like to do. And of course, like you, I found it too rewarding. But you're right. Getting into this field is being an accidental instructional designer is something I certainly hear time and time again. So that's great. And I love to hear the story of how you continued in your career path and how you've gotten to where you are today. So I want to just take a step back and, for the folks out there, there's so much out there about blended learning, and there's many different levels of expertise and levels of, comfortableness with blended learning. If you wouldn't mind just kind of giving us a quick little overview defining what blended learning is.
Sure. Blended learning for me, and I try to make everything practical so that it's not so hard and this mysterious term, blended learning.
We like practical.
Absolutely. And I think that we probably limit blended learning's power by just calling it instructional or formal learning with e-learning or classroom learning with e-learning. And I actually like a more broad approach or definition of blended learning. So I define it as using two or more formal and or informal instructional methods in order to achieve desired learning outcomes. And so that doesn't necessarily tie you to it has to be something e-learning, it has to be something classroom-based. You can use a variety of different instructional methods in order to achieve blended learning. And so I really try not to limit it to just that traditional view of blended learning with the e-learning and classroom learning, but I think that it is more powerful when we look at it more broadly.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good summary because, people are learning different with the digital era that we're in right now. There's so many tools and they're learning just at a different, either fast-paced or different ways now. And so being able to be flexible and kind of meet the learner where they are using blended learning practices, I think is helpful and more impactful when you're actually giving something that the learner wants. So I like the idea of you keeping it broad. Why do we have to pigeonhole this learning style? I think the possibilities are almost endless here. And so I'm glad that you say that. I like that approach as well. So if you wouldn't mind just talking to us about how one gets started. And I say that because I do hear in the L&D community so many times, what is blended learning? How do I get started? How much? What's the cost? What resources do I need to have? What kind of expertise do I need to skill myself up on to do this? If you could just provide some general elements on how one gets started, I think that would be helpful for the folks out there.
Sure. So getting started with blended learning is really fundamental to instructional design. So you have to always start with a needs assessment and tailor your blended learning strategy to the needs of the learner and the organization. And so my approach is simple. Here again, I'm really practical and try to keep things simple. And so I just have 4 steps in achieving blended learning. One being prepare for learning, engage in learning. The third is reflect on learning. And the fourth is act on learning. So if you have at least one activity for each of those 4 steps, you have accomplished blended learning. And it's really not more complicated than that. Once you have thoroughly assessed the needs of the learner, and then you design your strategy based on those 4 steps.
I like it. I like it simple because that is something that one could actually use in their business right away with very little complexity. And I think that's a really good approach that, you're covering all the bases there.
Yes, definitely. I mean, when I say prepare for learning, so let me give you an example. Say you're signing up for, let's call an instructional design class. And you need to do something to prepare yourself for that learning activity. And so you could look, maybe you do a Google search and you look at different blogs, or you go to a TD site and you see what information has been written on instructional design. You can also have conversations with someone who is already in that field or already doing instructional design just to prepare yourself for the class that you're going to. And then engaging in the learning is actually attending the class. Reflecting on learning is throughout the day, and especially at the end of multiple day courses, you take some time to reflect on what are those learning nuggets that you've acquired during that course, and making sure you write them down so that you are really concentrating and spend some time focusing on what you've learned. And then the last step is to act on the learning. So you've gone to the class, you've reflected on it, you have some learning nuggets. So what are you going to do to actually put that, to implement and apply what you've learned? Having a clearly defined action plan that will get you where you need to go and help you close those knowledge and skill gaps. So that could be something like going back and reading a book to take a deeper dive into what you've learned in the class. It could be shadowing someone who's actually working on an instructional design project. And it's really just that simple. Making sure that you have taken the steps to prepare for learning, engage in learning, reflect on learning, and act on learning.
Yeah, I really like that because the learners really do have a chance to kind of own their learning, if you will. as we talked briefly earlier on, everyone is learning in different ways, in different styles. That's why, L&D is so special because of all the different tools that are out there. But with blended learning, you do kind of have an ownership of your learning in regards to the pace and the path that you choose to take. And I think that's also a really critical piece to mention, that one can kind of control what it is they're learning and how they're learning with the blended learning approach.
Yep, definitely. As an instructional designer, you should design the training to be that way so that you are you have a right mix of the social, experiential, and instructive learning activities to help that person guide them through the learning experience.
Great. And so now I do hear in my community also that there are still some businesses who may have some interest about blended learning, but they're not quite on the bandwagon yet. And so what would you say would be a good business case practice for one to actually take to their company or someone in HR to say, hey, look, this is something that we really need to be doing in our business, and here's why. If you can provide some information on that, because I know that's a big one too, of stating the business case for this method.
Definitely. The most effective way to learn is to not just do classroom, be a passive learner. So you have to find a way to design training and show where you're going to be able to have the biggest bang for your buck. And so really when you're building that business case, you have to focus on what is the value added in adopting this particular approach. What does it get me if we do it this way versus if we just send them the training and then expect them to be able to apply it on their own? And so really just showing the difference of compare and contrast to, here's what would happen with the learner if we just do it this way without a blended learning approach or a blended learning strategy. And here's what it looks like if we do it with a blended learning strategy. And your results are tremendous when you use a blended learning approach because you're using the science of learning. You're actually giving them an opportunity to learn in different ways and appeal to their different learning styles. I know there's been a lot of talk about the relevancy of learning styles, but people just really need to be able to have variety in how they learn and find ways to make it fun and engaging. I think the business case is really to just focus on the results and the outcomes that you expect with that blended learning strategy.
Yeah. And so, with that said, you have covered such a great deal. And there's certainly quite a few takeaways from my discussion alone on this topic. Anything else that you may want to say to the users out there in terms of, maybe your experiences of, with your clients or elsewhere? Just, anything that you want to just mention about blended learning?
Really just make learning fun for the learner. Like I said, making it easy, making it fun, making it engaging. It all starts with that clear need. What do they need to actually do on their job? And then begin with the end in mind. And so I think that really just keeping focus on that, making it simple and practical, following these 4 steps will definitely get you to an effective blended learning strategy.
Well, thank you again.